Commander Kelrath stood at the viewing port of the transport ship, watching the blue and green planet grow larger. Earth, the homeworld of the species called humans. He felt nothing as he observed it. No curiosity, no excitement, no concern. The Varkesh did not feel such things. They had removed those weaknesses from their biology centuries ago. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Tall and lean, with gray skin and 4 arms. His people were perfect warriors. They fought with cold precision. They never hesitated. They never doubted. Fear was a concept they had eliminated from their genetics. It was the thing that made other species weak. The ship's computer announced their arrival. Kelrath turned from the window and walked to the landing bay. His movements were efficient and calculated. Every step served a purpose. Every action had logic behind it. The Vorkon horde had been sweeping across the outer worlds for months now. They destroyed everything in their path. The Galactic Council had finally agreed to form an alliance. Many species joined together to fight back. Even the humans, who had only joined the Council 5 years ago, had volunteered their military forces. Kelrath had been assigned as tactical liaison to a human unit. He would observe their methods and coordinate strikes between human and Varkesh forces. The assignment was logical. Someone needed to bridge the gap between their different combat styles. The transport landed on Arcturus Prime, a military staging ground. Kelrath walked down the ramp and immediately noticed the noise. Human soldiers were everywhere, talking, laughing, moving around with what seemed like chaos. There was no order to their movements. No efficiency. A human male approached him. He was shorter than Kelrath by half a meter, with dark hair showing gray at the sides. His face had lines that suggested age and experience. He wore the uniform of a human captain. "Commander Kelrath, I'm Captain Jake Morrison. Welcome to Arcturus Prime." The human extended his hand. Kelrath understood this was a greeting custom. He reached out with one of his 4 hands and grasped the human's hand briefly. The skin was warm, soft, fragile. "Captain Morrison, I am here to coordinate tactical operations between our forces." Jake smiled. Kelrath had read that humans used facial expressions to communicate emotion. This particular expression suggested friendliness. "Just call me Jake. Come on. I'll show you around and introduce you to the team." They walked through the base. Human soldiers were preparing equipment, checking weapons, talking in groups. Some were laughing at something on a data pad. Others sat quietly, looking at small photographs. The behavior seemed random and illogical. Jake led him to a briefing room where several humans waited. "This is Lieutenant Amy Chen, my second in command, and this is Sergeant Kyle Brooks. He leads our primary strike team." Amy was a woman with short, dark hair and sharp eyes. She nodded at Kelrath. "Commander, we've read the reports about Varkesh combat efficiency. Looking forward to working with you." Kyle was a large man with broad shoulders and a scar across his left cheek. He looked Kelrath up and down with open curiosity. 4 arms. That must be handy in a fight. It provides tactical advantages, Kelrath replied. Jake pulled up a holographic display showing their area of operations. "The Vorkans have taken 3 mining colonies in this sector. We need to push them back before they can fortify their positions." Kelrath studied the map with his analytical mind. "The logical approach is to strike their supply lines first, cut them off from reinforcements, then advance on the weakest colony while they are confused." "Good thinking," Amy said. "But we'd need to make sure civilian casualties are kept to a minimum. There are still workers trapped in those colonies." Kelrath tilted his head slightly. "Civilian casualties are inevitable in war. The mission objective should be the priority." The room went quiet for a moment. Jake looked at him with an expression Kelrath could not identify. "Commander, we don't leave people behind if we can help it. That's not how we do things." "Your methods seem inefficient." Kyle laughed. It was a loud sound that echoed in the room. "Maybe, but we sleep better at night. Kelrath did not understand the reference to sleep quality. He decided to move on. When do we begin operations? Tomorrow at dawn, Jake said. Tonight, the team will prep and rest. You're welcome to join us for dinner later. Get to know everyone. That is unnecessary. I will review tactical data and prepare my own units. Jake shrugged. Suit yourself, but the offer stands. That evening, Kelrath sat in his assigned quarters reviewing star maps and combat reports. His mind processed information quickly, calculating probabilities and strategic outcomes. The Vorkans were brutal fighters, but they relied on overwhelming force rather than strategy. They could be defeated with proper planning. Through his window, he could see the human barracks, soldiers gathered outside, sitting around in groups. Some played games, others talked and gestured animatedly. One group sang together, their voices carrying across the compound. Kelrath observed them with analytical detachment. They wasted energy on social bonding. They showed emotion openly, which could be exploited by enemies. They cared about individual lives even when logic dictated otherwise. By every measure, they should be weak warriors. Yet the reports showed humans had won battles against larger forces. They adapted quickly to new situations. They fought with a ferocity that surprised their enemies. There was something about them that the data could not fully explain. A knock came at his door. Kelrath opened it to find Kyle standing there with another human, a young private with red hair. Hey, Commander, Kyle said casually. Some of us are doing sparring practice. Thought you might want to join. Good way to understand how we fight. Kelrath considered this. Physical training data would be useful. Very well. They walked to a training area where several humans were engaged in hand-to-hand combat exercises. Kyle stepped onto the mat. Let's see what those forearms can do. The match lasted 30 seconds. Kelrath moved with perfect efficiency, using his superior reach and speed to pin Kyle to the mat without causing injury. Kyle laughed as he stood up, rubbing his shoulder. Damn! You're fast! You telegraphed your movements. Your strikes were predictable. Yeah, well, you've got forearms and reflexes like a cat. That's a pretty big advantage. Kyle extended his hand. Good match, Commander. Kelrath grasped the hand again, noting the human's grip was firm despite his loss. You are not upset by your defeat? Nah, I learned something. That's worth more than winning. Kyle grinned. Besides, it's nice to know we've got someone like you on our side. As Kelrath walked back to his quarters that night, he processed the day's events. Humans were inefficient. They were emotional. They prioritized individuals over mission objectives. They showed weakness openly, but they also showed something else, something he did not have a word for. Something that made them smile at defeat and sing before battle. Something that made them want to save civilians even when it complicated missions. Kelrath did not understand it, but he filed it away in his memory as data worth observing further. Perhaps there was more to learn about humans than he had initially calculated. The briefing room was crowded with human and Varkesh officers. Holographic displays showed Kepler Station, a mining colony now occupied by Vorkan forces. The enemy had built heavy fortifications and shield generators around the main facility. Taking it back would not be easy. Jake stood at the center, pointing to key locations on the map. Intel shows approximately 2,000 Vorkan soldiers dug in here. They've got artillery positions on the high ground and shields protecting their command center. We need to take those shields down so our ships can provide orbital support. Kelrath stepped forward, his analytical mind already processing the data. The optimal approach is a direct assault on 3 fronts. We overwhelm their defenses through superior numbers. Estimated casualties would be 37% of our forces. Acceptable losses for a strategic objective. The room went silent. Several human soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Amy crossed her arms and stared at the display with a frown. Jake shook his head. 37% means we lose 300 soldiers, Commander. That's not acceptable to us. The mission objective takes priority over individual losses, Kelrath stated. It was simple logic. Why did humans not understand this? Not in my unit, Jake replied firmly. He turned back to the map and began drawing new approach routes. We can use the canyon system here to avoid their artillery. Small teams infiltrate from multiple angles. It takes longer, but we cut casualties down to around 12%. Kelrath calculated the new approach. It would work, but it added 4 hours to the operation. 4 hours where the Vorkans could call for reinforcements. Your method increases mission risk by 18%. But it saves 200 lives, Amy added. That's worth the extra risk. Kelrath observed their faces. They were serious, determined. They genuinely valued those individual lives more than mission efficiency. It was illogical, but it was their truth. Very well, Kelrath agreed. We will proceed with your plan. The drop to Kepler Station was violent. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky as dropships descended through the atmosphere. Kelrath sat in the troop bay of a human transport surrounded by soldiers checking their weapons and equipment. The ship shook from explosions nearby. "Hang on!" the pilot shouted. Lieutenant Ben Carter, a young human with steady hands, jerked the controls hard to the right. The ship twisted and dove, barely avoiding a missile. Another explosion rocked them, and alarms blared. Ben's voice came over the speakers, tense but controlled. "We're taking fire from the East Ridge. Going in hot. 30 seconds to drop." The humans around Kelrath showed signs of stress. Elevated heart rates, rapid breathing, tense muscles. But they did not panic. They encouraged each other with words and gestures. One soldier, a woman named Lisa Martinez, made a joke that caused others to laugh despite the danger. The ship's bay doors opened. Wind and noise rushed in. "Go, go, go!" Kyle shouted. They jumped from the dropship into a storm of weapons fire. Kelrath landed smoothly, his 4 arms drawing weapons as his feet touched the ground. Around him, human soldiers took cover and began returning fire. The Vorkans had established defensive positions along the colony's perimeter. Kelrath moved forward with calculated precision, targeting enemies with perfect accuracy. Each shot found its mark. His combat systems processed multiple threats simultaneously, prioritizing targets based on danger level. War was mathematics, and he was very good at mathematics. Kyle's voice crackled over the communication channel. "Kelrath, we've got wounded at Marker 7. Corporal Danny Hayes is pinned down." Kelrath checked his tactical display. Marker 7 was in an exposed position. Moving there would be inefficient. "He should withdraw to cover. He's hit in the leg. Can't move on his own." This was exactly the kind of inefficiency Kelrath had warned about. Risking more soldiers to save one who was already compromised made no tactical sense. But the humans would do it anyway. Through his optical sensors, Kelrath watched as Danny tried to crawl toward cover. Vorkan fire kept him pinned. Then another human, a private whose name Kelrath did not know, ran from cover toward Danny. Plasma bolts struck the ground around him. He reached Danny and grabbed him, dragging him backward. Lisa provided covering fire from her position, exposing herself to enemy weapons. Her shots were precise, despite her vulnerable position. She kept the Vorkans suppressed long enough for the private to pull Danny to safety. Kelrath calculated the risk they had taken. 73% chance of either or both being killed. Yet they succeeded, and now Danny would survive to fight again. The assault continued. Human and Varkesh squads advanced through the colony in coordinated waves. Kelrath found himself fighting alongside Kyle's team. The sergeant moved with practiced efficiency, calling out targets and directing his soldiers with rapid commands. A group of Vorkans emerged from a building on their left flank. Kelrath calculated angles and trajectories, preparing to engage. Then Kyle shouted a warning and threw himself sideways, knocking Kelrath off balance. A plasma bolt seared through the space where Kelrath had been standing a moment before. Kyle hit the ground hard, his shoulder taking the impact. He grimaced in pain but rolled to cover and kept firing. Kelrath eliminated the Vorkan who had nearly killed him, then moved to Kyle's position. "Your shoulder is injured," Kelrath observed. "Yeah, but you're not. You're welcome, by the way." Kyle smiled despite the pain. "Why did you risk injury to save me? It compromised your tactical position." Kyle checked his weapon and leaned against the wall to catch his breath. "Because you're one of us now, Commander. We look out for each other. That's how we stay alive." Kelrath processed this response. Kyle had acted against tactical logic to preserve Kelrath's life, not because it served a strategic purpose, but because of some intangible connection between soldiers. This was the thing he kept observing, this bond that made humans fight for each other beyond rational calculation. The battle for Kepler Station lasted 6 hours. Human adaptability combined with Varkesh precision proved effective. The humans adjusted their tactics on the fly, responding to changing situations with creative solutions. When one approach failed, they tried another. They communicated constantly, sharing information and coordinating strikes. Kelrath watched Amy lead her squad through a building clearance operation. She moved with confidence, trusting her soldiers to cover their assigned sectors. When they encountered unexpected resistance, she modified the plan immediately, using hand signals and quick verbal commands. Her soldiers responded without hesitation. The shield generators finally fell. Orbital strikes from the fleet above eliminated the remaining Vorkan artillery. The colony was retaken. Final casualty count, 8%. Better than either Jake's or Kelrath's predictions. In the aftermath, Kelrath walked through the medical area. Wounded soldiers received treatment. Danny Hayes was having his leg bandaged. Lisa sat nearby with minor burns on her arms. Kyle's shoulder was being put in a support brace. They talked and even laughed as medics worked on them. Jake found Kelrath observing the scene. "Good work out there, Commander. Your Varkesh units were exactly where we needed them." "Your tactics were effective," Kelrath admitted. "Casualties were lower than my projections." "That's because we worked together." "Your precision combined with our flexibility makes us stronger than either of us alone." Jake paused. "You saved Ben's life when his dropship got hit on extraction, provided covering fire while he got his ship out. Thank you for that." Kelrath had not considered it noteworthy. It was the logical action, but Jake's gratitude seemed genuine. He is a skilled pilot. His survival maintains unit effectiveness. Jake smiled, that same expression that suggested he understood something Kelrath did not. "Is that the only reason?" The captain walked away before Kelrath could formulate a response. That night, Kelrath filed his report to Varkesh Command. He detailed the battle, the tactics used, the outcomes achieved. Then he added a note that he himself found unusual. Human emotional responses to combat create unexpected tactical advantages. Their loyalty to each other maintains unit cohesion even under extreme stress. This may warrant further study. In his quarters, Kelrath reviewed footage from the battle. He watched Kyle throw himself into danger to protect him. He watched Lisa risk exposure to save Danny. He watched humans coordinate through emotion-filled communication that somehow worked better than Varkesh cold efficiency. They fought despite being afraid. He had seen the fear in their eyes, in their body language. But they fought anyway, for each other, for people they barely knew, for abstract concepts like loyalty and duty. Kelrath did not understand it, but somewhere in his advanced mind, a small subroutine began processing this data differently, not as numbers and probabilities, but as something else, something his people had tried to eliminate centuries ago, something that might actually be important. The emergency transmission came at 0400 hours. Kelrath was reviewing tactical data when every screen in the command center turned red. The Vorkan horde had launched a massive counteroffensive, not just one attack, but coordinated strikes across 3 entire systems. Jake burst into the command center, still pulling on his jacket. "Report!" Amy was already at the main console, her face pale in the glow of the displays. "Sir, Vorkan fleet movements detected in the Arcturus, Kepler, and Meridian sectors. Initial estimates show 300 ships, maybe more." "Where are they headed?" Jake demanded. The answer came from another officer. "All vectors point to Meridian Hub, sir." The room went dead silent. Meridian Hub was the heart of the Alliance. It housed 50 million civilians and served as the primary logistics center for the entire war effort. If it fell, the Alliance would collapse. The war would be lost. Within hours, every available ship was racing toward Meridian Hub. But everyone knew they would not arrive in time. The defending fleet had only 100 ships. The ground forces stationed there numbered 45,000 troops, including 5,000 humans and 3,000 Varkesh. Kelrath ran the numbers repeatedly. Each calculation gave the same result. The Vorkans would win. They had superior numbers, superior firepower, and the advantage of momentum. Probability of successful defense, 4.7%. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Kelrath watched on the view screen as species representatives argued over what to do. Many advocated for immediate evacuation, save who they could, and abandon the station. The human ambassador, an older man named Frank Delano, stood up. "We won't abandon those people. Humanity volunteers to hold the line while evacuations proceed." A council member, a floating creature from the Althean species, responded with obvious concern. "Human delegate, you understand this means certain death for your forces? The numbers do not favor survival." "We understand," Frank said quietly. "But we've never left people behind. We're not starting now." Jake gathered his officers in the briefing room. Maps showed Meridian Hub's defensive positions. The station was built into a large asteroid with multiple levels. There were choke points they could defend, but not enough soldiers to hold them all. "We'll be outnumbered 4-1, Amy said, studying the layout. "Maybe worse." Kyle leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So we make them pay for every meter they take. Buy time for the civilians." "Time for 200,000 transports to evacuate 50 million people," Jake added. "We need at least 3 days, probably more." Kelrath spoke up. "Based on enemy force projections, defensive positions will be overrun within 18 hours, maximum." "Then we make it 18 hours, Jake said with determination. "Every minute counts." The fleet arrived at Meridian Hub ahead of the Vorkans, but only by hours. Kelrath deployed his Varkesh units to the eastern defensive sectors. Humans took the western and southern approaches. Other Alliance species filled the gaps. Kelrath worked alongside human combat engineers, helping fortify positions. He watched them place barriers, set up automated turrets, and create fallback positions. They worked efficiently despite the knowledge of what was coming. A human civilian coordinator named Claire Adams approached him with a data pad. She was a small woman with tired eyes and gray hair. "Commander Kelrath, I wanted to thank you. My family is in Sector 7. Knowing you're here to protect them means everything." Kelrath looked at the woman. She held up a small device showing moving images. A family. Adults and children smiling together. "These are your family members?" "Yes. My daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren. They're loading onto transports now, but it'll take time to get everyone out." For the first time, Kelrath considered what those numbers in his calculations actually represented. 50 million was not just a statistic. It was individuals, families, people like Claire's grandchildren who had done nothing except be born in the wrong place at the wrong time. "We will hold the defenses," Kelrath found himself saying. "Your family will evacuate safely. Claire smiled with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Commander." That evening, Kelrath observed the human soldiers preparing for battle. Some gathered in groups to pray to their various gods. Others wrote messages on data pads, recording words for loved ones they might never see again. A few sat alone in quiet contemplation. Amy found him watching them. She sat down nearby and pulled out a small photograph. "This is my daughter, Sophie. She's 9 years old. Lives on Earth with her father." The image showed a young human child with dark hair and a bright smile. "Why do you show me this?" "So you understand what I'm fighting for," Amy replied softly. "Not just coordinates on a map or strategic objectives, real people, real lives." She paused. "If I don't make it back, someone will give this to her and tell her that her mom was brave. If the probability of survival is low, why show me this? Why fight at all?" Amy looked at him with an expression he was beginning to recognize. Sadness mixed with resolve. "Because someone has to. Because those 50 million people deserve a chance. Because that's what humans do." She stood up. "You'll understand one day, Commander." Kelrath found Kyle in the training area, working with a young private named Chris Nelson. The boy looked terrified, his hands shaking as he checked his weapon. "Keep your breathing steady," Kyle told him patiently. "When the shooting starts, focus on your training. Stay with your squad. We'll get through this together." "Sergeant, I've never been in a real battle before. What if I freeze up?" Kyle put a hand on the young soldier's shoulder. "Everyone's scared their first time. Hell, I'm scared, and this is my 20th deployment. But you know what? You've got the best team in the fleet watching your back. We won't let anything happen to you." Kelrath approached them. "The probability of survival is low. Giving him false hope is illogical." Kyle turned to face him, his expression serious. "It's not false hope, Commander. It's the truth. We do watch each other's backs. And yeah, maybe the odds suck, but we've beaten bad odds before." He looked back at Chris. "You're going to do fine, kid." Later, Jake found Kelrath on an observation deck overlooking the docking bays. Transport ships were loading continuously, thousands of civilians streaming aboard. Children, elderly, families clutching their possessions. Jake carried 2 bottles of amber liquid. He opened them and offered one to Kelrath. "Whiskey, human tradition. You drink it before a battle you might not survive." Kelrath accepted the bottle and tasted it. The liquid burned his throat. "This seems designed to impair combat efficiency." "It's not about efficiency," Jake said, taking a drink from his own bottle. "It's about being human. Tomorrow's going to be hell, Commander, but we'll face it together." They stood in silence, watching the evacuations continue. Finally, Kelrath spoke. "Why do you fight knowing you will likely die?" Jake considered the question. "Because those people down there deserve to live. Because someone has to stand between them and the enemy. Because if we don't, who will?" He turned to look at Kelrath. "Your people removed fear from their biology. But humans, we feel it every time, every battle, every mission. We're terrified, but we fight anyway. That is illogical. Maybe, but it's also who we are." Jake finished his drink. "Get some rest, Commander. Tomorrow we make history, one way or another." Kelrath returned to his quarters but did not rest. He ran tactical simulations throughout the night. Every scenario ended the same way. Defeat, death, failure. The mathematics were absolute. But then he thought about Kyle protecting Chris, about Amy showing him her daughter's picture, about Claire's grandchildren, about Jake drinking whiskey and facing impossible odds with calm determination. Something felt different in Kelrath's chest. His 2 hearts were beating faster than normal. His hands, which never trembled, felt strange. He ran a medical diagnostic. All systems showed normal function. But something was wrong. He reviewed the simulations again. saw his own designation alongside human units, calculated probability of his own termination, 93.4%. For the first time in his entire life, that number meant something more than data. Kelrath stared at his reflection in the dark window. Outside, the last transports prepared to launch. Morning was coming. The Vorkans were coming, and deep in the parts of his brain that his people had tried to eliminate, something ancient stirred. He did not know what it was. But he would find out soon enough. The Vorkan fleet arrived like a storm. Hundreds of ships darkened the sky above Meridian Hub. Drop pods began falling almost immediately, streaking through the atmosphere like meteors. The sound was deafening, a constant roar of engines and explosions. Kelrath stood at his command position in the eastern sector, coordinating Varkesh defensive units. His tactical display showed red markers appearing across every sector. Thousands of enemy soldiers landing simultaneously. It was exactly as he had calculated. Overwhelming force meant to crush resistance quickly. "All units, hold your positions," he commanded over the communication network. His voice was steady, logical, emotionless, just as it should be. The first wave of Vorkan heavy infantry appeared from the smoke and dust. Massive creatures wearing thick armor and carrying plasma cannons. They advanced in tight formations behind portable shield generators. "Target the shield generators," Kelrath ordered. His Varkesh soldiers opened fire with precision, every shot calculated for maximum effect. The first line of shields went down. Human Marines from Jake's unit added their firepower, and the combined assault stopped the advance. Across the communication channels, Kelrath could hear the battle unfolding. Kyle's voice directing his team through building-to-building fighting. Amy coordinating artillery strikes, Ben in his fighter craft, dodging anti-aircraft fire to provide close air support. The humans fought with their usual combination of chaos and effectiveness. The first defensive line held for 2 hours. Then Vorkan reinforcements landed behind their front units, and the pressure increased. Kelrath calculated constantly, adjusting positions, redirecting fire, maintaining the mathematical balance between offense and defense. A new alert flashed on his screen. Medical stations in Sector 4 were under attack. Vorkan aerial units were deliberately targeting areas marked with medical symbols. Through his optical sensors, he zoomed in on the scene. Human medics were trying to evacuate wounded soldiers while under fire. One medic, Lieutenant Nina Wells, ran through plasma bolts to reach an injured Marine. She grabbed him and started dragging him toward cover. A Vorkan shot struck her in the side. She fell, kept crawling, determined to save the wounded soldier even as she bled. Jake's voice cut through the channel. "Nina's down! Someone get to her position!" Kelrath watched Jake sprint from cover, running toward the fallen medic. Plasma fire erupted all around him. The probability of Jake being hit was 78%, but he kept running. Reached Nina, pulled her and the wounded Marine both toward safety. Something shifted in Kelrath's chest. A tightness he had never experienced before. His analytical mind noted Jake's illogical behavior, but another part of his consciousness focused only on one thought. Jake might die. The second wave of Vorkans broke through the southern defenses. Amy's units fell back to secondary positions, fighting every step. Kelrath redirected 2 Varkesh battalions to support her, but it left his own eastern flank exposed. Tactical risk, 43% chance of breakthrough. The battle raged for hours. Kelrath fought with his usual precision, 4 arms moving independently to target multiple enemies. His combat efficiency remained high, but that strange tightness in his chest persisted. His hearts were beating too fast. His hands felt different. Then the scanners detected something new, a massive signature emerging from a Vorkan transport ship. Kelrath magnified the image, and his analytical mind processed what he saw with cold clarity. A Fortress-class walker, 50 meters tall, heavily armored. Energy shields that could withstand orbital bombardment. 4 massive legs and dozens of weapon systems. It began moving toward the civilian evacuation center where transports were still loading people. "All units, target that walker," Jake commanded. Every weapon in range opened fire on the machine. Plasma bolts, missiles, and railgun rounds hit its shields and dissipated harmlessly. The walker continued its advance, each step shaking the ground. Kelrath ran calculations. Shield strength, too high for conventional weapons. Weak point, reactor core at its center, accessible only from inside. Solution, someone would have to board it, fight through internal defenses, and plant explosives manually. Probability of survival, 0.7%. "I've got a plan," Jake said over the command channel. His voice was calm. Too calm. "I can get inside and blow the reactor. Need someone to cover the approach." Amy's voice responded immediately, tight with emotion. "Sir, that's a suicide run." "It's the only way. That thing reaches the evacuation center and thousands die." Kelrath's mind calculated the scenario. Jake would die. 99.3% certainty. No Jake telling bad jokes during briefings. No Jake sharing whiskey and talking about honor. No Jake making illogical decisions that somehow worked. The tightness in Kelrath's chest became painful. His hands, which never trembled, began to shake. His combat efficiency dropped by 3%, then 5%. His mind was still processing data, but now other thoughts intruded. Unwanted, unavoidable. What if Jake dies? What if Kyle dies trying to help him? What if Amy? What if all of them? A young human private named Molly Grant noticed Kelrath standing motionless. "Commander, are you okay?" Kelrath tried to speak, but no words came. His optical sensors tracked the walker's progress. 13 minutes until it reached the evacuation center. Approximately 8,000 civilians still loading. Claire's grandchildren might be among them. The mathematics was clear. Jake had to go. Someone had to stop that machine. The mission required sacrifice. Cold logic demanded it. But Kelrath's hands were shaking. His hearts were racing. His mind kept showing him images of Jake not returning, of Amy receiving the news, of Sophie on Earth learning her mother's friend had died. "Commander Kelrath," Molly asked again, concern in her voice. Understanding struck him like a physical blow, this sensation. This terrible, overwhelming feeling, the racing hearts, the trembling hands, the inability to think clearly, the overwhelming concern for others over tactical considerations. This was fear. Fear. The thing his people had eliminated. The weakness they had removed from their genetics. It was here, inside him, growing with every second. "I will go with Captain Morrison," Kelrath heard himself say. The words surprised him even as he spoke them. Illogical. Inefficient. 2 lives risked instead of 1. But he could not stop speaking. "Varkesh agility and 4 arms will increase success probability. This is the logical choice." Jake's voice came through. "Commander, you don't have to do this." "I am aware." Kelrath was already moving, running toward Jake's position. His legs carried him forward even as his mind screamed that this was wrong. The fear was growing stronger. Every step increased the probability of his own termination. But he kept running. He reached Jake's position. The captain looked at him with that expression humans used to show respect. "Thanks, Commander. Let's do this." They ran toward the walker together. Vorkan's soldiers tried to stop them. Kelrath's combat training took over, his 4 arms firing in perfect synchronization. But his hands still shook. His shots were less accurate than normal. Jake fought beside him, providing covering fire. They reached the walker's leg and began climbing. The metal was hot and slick. Fear screamed in Kelrath's mind. Every moment brought them closer to death. Inside the walker, they fought through corridors filled with Vorkan defenders. Jake's tactical expertise combined with Kelrath's physical advantages kept them moving forward. But time was running out. They reached the reactor core. Jake began placing explosives while Kelrath held the entrance. More Vorkans poured in. He fired all 4 weapons until they overheated. His hearts felt like they would burst from his chest. "Done!" Jake shouted. 30 seconds! Move!" They ran. The walker's interior became a maze of smoke and fire. Kelrath's fear was absolute now, consuming every thought. He was going to die. Jake was going to die. They would not escape. But they kept running. The exit appeared ahead. 20 meters, 15, 10. The reactor began to destabilize behind them. They dove through the opening and fell to the ground outside. The walker exploded. The shockwave threw them both across the battlefield. Kelrath felt debris strike his body. Pain registered for the first time he could remember. Everything went dark. When his optical sensors reactivated, he was lying on his back. His body ached. One of his arms was bent at an unnatural angle. Jake lay nearby, unconscious but breathing. The walker's burning remains towered above them, no longer a threat. The evacuation center was safe. They had succeeded. Kelrath lay there experiencing pain and fear simultaneously. He understood now. He understood what humans felt in every battle, this terrible certainty of potential death, this desperate concern for others, this overwhelming emotion that made every decision harder. And yet they fought anyway. Feeling all of this, they still chose to run toward danger. Not because logic demanded it, but because people needed saving, because it was right. A human medic reached them. "Hang on, Commander. We've got you." As darkness took him again, Kelrath's last thought was simple. He had felt fear for the first time fighting alongside humanity. And despite everything, he had not stopped. Could not stop. Perhaps there was strength in fear after all. Kelrath woke in the medical bay 3 days later. His broken arm had been set and was healing in a regeneration field. Various other injuries were being treated by automated systems. The bay was crowded with wounded soldiers from multiple species. The smell of antiseptic and the sound of medical equipment filled the air. A human nurse noticed he was awake. "Commander Kelrath, good to see you conscious. How do you feel?" How did he feel? The question was more complex than the nurse realized. Physically, he felt pain. But there was something else. Something new that had not gone away even though the immediate danger had passed. "Functional," he replied. It was the closest word he could find. The nurse smiled. "Captain Morrison is in the next bed over. He's been asking about you." Kelrath turned his head. Jake lay in a nearby medical bed, bandaged and connected to various monitors. But he was awake and alert. When he saw Kelrath looking, he grinned. "Hey, Commander, we made it." Probability suggested otherwise. "Yeah, well, we beat the odds. That's kind of our specialty." Jake shifted carefully in his bed. "The walker went down. Evacuation transports got out safely. Battle lasted 2 more days after that, but we held them off." "What is our status?" Jake's expression became more serious. "We won. Vorkans withdrew after taking heavy casualties. Meridian Hub is secure, but we lost a lot of good people, about 38% casualties across all units." Kelrath processed this information. They had succeeded. The mission was complete. But the cost had been high. He thought about the soldiers he had fought beside. How many were gone now? Over the next few days, Kelrath recovered and learned what had happened during the battle. Kyle had held his position for 14 hours straight, saving dozens of civilians trapped in collapsed buildings. Amy had coordinated the final counterattack that broke the Vorkan advance. Ben had flown 72 combat missions without rest. Chris, the young private who had been so afraid, had earned a commendation for valor. Nina had survived her wounds and was already back on duty. Claire's family had evacuated successfully. 50 million civilians had escaped because 45,000 soldiers chose to stand and fight. When Kelrath was cleared to leave medical care, he found Jake in the observation deck overlooking Meridian Hub. The station showed signs of battle damage, but repair crews were already working. Lights were coming back on. Life was returning. Jake held 2 bottles of whiskey. He offered one to Kelrath. Figured we earned this. They drank in silence for a moment. Then Kelrath spoke. During the battle, I experienced something unusual. Yeah? What was that? Fear. The word felt strange to say. My people eliminated it from our biology centuries ago. But when I saw you planning to enter that walker, I felt my heart's race. My hands trembled. I could not think clearly. I was afraid you would die. Afraid I would die. Afraid for all of the humans I have fought beside. Jake looked at him with understanding. And you did it anyway. Ran right into danger even though you were terrified. Yes, it was illogical. Inefficient. Against everything I was taught. Kelrath paused. But I could not let you go alone. That's not weakness, Commander. That's courage. Real courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. Jake took another drink. You asked me once why we fight when we're scared. Now you know. We feel that fear every single time. But we fight for each other. For people we'll never meet. For tomorrow. Kelrath looked out at the station. I understand now. Fear is not weakness. It reminds us what we have to lose. It makes us value what we are protecting. My people thought removing it made us stronger. But you showed me the truth. Strength is not the absence of fear. It is action despite fear. Damn right. Jake raised his bottle. To acting despite fear. To acting despite fear. Kelrath repeated, touching his bottle to Jake's. The next day, Amy found Kelrath in the command center. She approached with Chris, the young private, following her. Commander, Chris wanted to thank you. You saved his squad when that building collapsed in Sector 9. Chris looked nervous but determined. Thank you, sir. If you hadn't pulled us out, we would have died. Kelrath remembered the moment. He had heard screaming over the communication channel, had calculated that saving them would expose his position, had gone anyway because the fear of losing them had been greater than the fear for his own safety. You are a soldier, Kelrath said to Chris. Soldiers do not abandon each other. After they left, Kelrath sat at a terminal and began writing his report to Varkesh High Command. The words came differently than before. He detailed the battle with his usual precision. But then he added something new. He wrote about fear, about how humans experience it in every battle but fight anyway. About how concern for others can be a tactical advantage, not a weakness. About how bonds between soldiers create resilience that pure logic cannot match. He wrote about Kyle and Amy and Jake and all the others who had shown him what courage truly meant. He recommended that Varkesh forces integrate permanently with human units, not just for tactical efficiency, but to learn what his people had lost when they eliminated emotion. Fear, he wrote, was not a flaw to be removed. It was part of what made fighting meaningful. The next week, Kelrath stood in formation as medals were awarded to soldiers who had distinguished themselves in battle. Jake received the Alliance Star of Valor. Kyle was promoted to lieutenant. Amy received a commendation for tactical excellence. Chris and dozens of others were recognized for their courage. When Kelrath's name was called, he stepped forward. The human general presenting the medals looked up at him with respect. Commander Kelrath, for extraordinary valor and selfless sacrifice in the face of impossible odds, the Alliance awards you the Medal of Honor. You have shown us that courage knows no species boundary. As the medal was placed around his neck, Kelrath looked out at the assembled soldiers, human and Varkesh standing together, species that had learned to fight as one. He thought about how much he had changed since arriving at Arcturus Prime months ago. Later, Jake approached him with news. Varkesh High Command approved your request. You're permanently assigned to human forces. Looks like you're stuck with us, Commander. That is acceptable. Kelrath allowed himself something he had never done before. A smile. It felt strange on his face, but also right. Kyle came over with his entire fire team. "Hey, we're throwing a party tonight. Real food, terrible music, and probably some dancing. You coming?" "I do not understand the tactical purpose of parties." Kyle laughed. "That's the point. No tactical purpose. Just being human, or being with humans in your case. Come on, you'll enjoy it." That night, Kelrath attended the party. He watched humans laugh, dance, tell stories about fallen comrades, and celebrate being alive. They included him in their conversations. They treated him as one of them. Amy showed him more pictures of her daughter. Kyle taught him a human card game. Ben tried to explain what music was and why it mattered. Slowly, Kelrath began to understand that these moments between battles were as important as the battles themselves. Claire Adams found him and hugged him. Her family had made it home safely. She cried and thanked him repeatedly. Kelrath felt that strange tightness in his chest again, but this time it was not fear. It was something else, something warm. As the party continued, Kelrath stepped outside to the observation deck. Stars filled the view. Somewhere out there, the war continued. More battles would come, more fear, more risk, more chances to lose people he cared about. But he would face it all, alongside humans who had taught him that feeling afraid did not make him weak. It made him alive. It made him care. It gave him something worth fighting for. Jake joined him, carrying drinks. "Thinking deep thoughts, Commander?" "I was reflecting on my transformation. I came here believing fear was a weakness. That emotion clouded judgment. That individual lives had less value than mission objectives. I was wrong about all of it. We all learn. That's what makes us better." Jake looked out at the stars. "What's next for you?" "I will continue to serve with human forces. Continue to learn. Continue to fight despite fear." Kelrath turned to face Jake. "What is our next mission?" Jake grinned. "Rest up, Commander. Intel suggests the Vorkans are regrouping for another push. We'll be deployed again in a few weeks. Then we face it together." "Damn right we do." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Kelrath thought about everything that had happened, about discovering fear for the first time, about learning what courage truly meant, about finding something his people had lost centuries ago. He thought about Kyle and Amy and Ben and Chris and all the others, about Claire and her grandchildren, about Sophie, who he had never met but felt he knew through Amy's stories, about all the millions of lives they had protected. His people had removed fear to become perfect warriors, but humans had shown him that perfection was an illusion. True strength came from acknowledging fear and choosing to act anyway, from caring about others even when it hurt, from fighting not because logic demanded it, but because people needed protecting. Kelrath had felt fear for the first time fighting alongside humanity. But he had also felt courage, friendship, purpose, hope. All the things his people thought they did not need. He was no longer just a Varkesh warrior following cold calculations. He was something new. Something his species had not seen in centuries. A warrior who understood both logic and heart, efficiency and emotion, precision and passion. He was part of something greater than himself. Part of a team that fought together, laughed together, mourned together. Part of humanity's war, even though he was not human. Music drifted out from the party behind them, voices raised in song and laughter, the sound of life continuing despite everything. "Come on," Jake said, clapping him on the shoulder with one hand. "They're about to start the really terrible karaoke. You don't want to miss Kyle trying to sing. It's hilariously bad." Kelrath followed Jake back into the party, into the noise and chaos and emotion, into the place where soldiers became family, into the thing that made all the fear, all the pain, all the sacrifice worth it. He had learned what it meant to fight alongside humanity, and he would carry that lesson for the rest of his life, however long or short it might be, because he had learned the most important truth of all. Strength was not found in the absence of fear. It was found in standing beside those you cared about and facing the darkness together. That was what it meant to be human. And now, in his own way, Kelrath understood.